Second.
We're ready, technically, we're ready? Starting right on time. Great. Welcome, everybody. I hereby call the meeting to order. This is an open meeting of the Broadcasting Board of Governors. This meeting is being held in compliance with the Government in the Sunshine Act. Governor Meehan's not here, so I don't think. One second, we're just going to go find one of our governors here. I'm going to keep pushing ahead on this stuff, and then we'll keep going. The live webcast will also be available for later viewing on the BBG website, www.bbg.gov. I'd like to once again welcome Assistant Secretary of State for Public Affairs, Douglas France, who is joining us as Secretary of State John Kerry's delegated representative to the board for today's meeting. Welcome, Doug. The presence of 5 or more governors satisfied the board's quorum requirement. The board may conduct business based on a majority vote, a quorum being present. So I'm very excited today, as I think my fellow board members are, because when the board came together a couple months ago, we really talked about what we wanted to do as a board. And the way we see it, the board really has 3 functions. We have a function of governance of the organization. We have a function of oversight of the various things that the taxpayers are funding, and we have a responsibility to set strategic direction for the different entities so that the esteemed managers we have of the various networks can go head in the direction that they need to head. And I think in the past, the board has really spent a lot of time on governance and probably not as much time as it should be on oversight and strategy. And so today's format really represents the debut of the new format that the board intends to really shift some of the balance back to oversight and to strategy. I think that we won't get it all right today. This is going to be an evolving process. David Ensor and VOA are a bit of a guinea pig for the first board members, so thank you, David, for that. And over the course of the next couple meetings, hopefully we'll settle into a rhythm and get this right. So in October, the board adopted the use of a consent agenda, which we used for the last board meeting, and this allows us to kind of roll through the governance stuff. We did a lot in the last board meeting. This board meeting, we actually have only a couple things on the consent agreement or the consent calendar. What we're going to introduce today is these 2 other pieces of the meeting. We're going to, as I said, do a deep dive each meeting on a different network. Today we're going to start with VOA, and we're actually going to leave this room, thankfully, go down to a studio where there's a little bit more of a technological set of capabilities which will allow VOA to show off the stuff they're doing. And we'll have plenty of time after that. I think the way we're going to divide it up is a 45-minute presentation, David, and then 45 minutes for plenty of questions from the board and the public if they'd like to ask. We're then going to come back up here and move into the strategic part of the board meeting. One of the things we're grappling with as a board and should be grappling with as an organization is how do you match our set of missions that are still very relevant in today's world with a different technological world where when we first were formed, a lot of our entities, it was beaming radio signals and behind the Iron Curtain. Now we've got a world that's very complicated with still the need for radio waves behind different levels of curtains, which are different today, but also the need for various other forms of communication. People have phones, people have internet, people have all sorts of things, and we're going to hear from a panel of experts that's going to talk to the board about how you take an organization and shift a mission to a different technological world, and I think that will be great. Same format with a set of panelists talking and then plenty of time to ask questions. So I'm excited about that, and I'm hoping that this format will allow us to really progress and evolve in future meetings and get into each of our networks and each of our strategic issues. And the next board meeting will be at MBN for their 10th anniversary. Brian will be hosting, and we'll be doing our deep dive on MBN and also setting up a format which we haven't quite figured out yet to deal with that region, which is so critical to to the U.S. strategic interests and what's happening in the world. So I'm excited about that. So everybody watching, please join us February from Springfield, Virginia, and MBN. So before we get started on today's agenda, I'd like to start with some observation about the threats to our journalists and about media freedom around the world, as always. Since the board last met in October, our audiences have gathered in Independence Square in Ukraine to demand more democratic freedoms, risk blogging in Vietnam in the face of dangerous limits on dissent, participate in elections in Mali and Mozambique, and more. Our networks have reported unhesitatingly on these actions, analyzed their political implications, and continue to provide an uncensored forum for news and discussion in these and other countries whose governments prohibit access to a free press. And as all of us know, that's not very easy much of the time. In November, Radio Free Asia's young reporter, Mo Thuong, passed away after he was severely injured in a traffic accident while on assignment. We are deeply saddened by this loss and extend our deepest sympathies to the family and colleagues of Mo Thuong. And I would like to invite Governor Meehan to say a few words on his behalf, except Governor Meehan is missing. So, Libby, you're here. Do you mind saying a couple words, kind of impromptu, on behalf of Mo Thuong? I mean, our deepest sympathies to you and the RFA family.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Motu was a rising star for us. He was an extraordinary person, as Susan McHugh and Michael did have a chance to spend time with him in Burma. In the last 9 months, he was caught behind enemy lines covering the various ethnic wars in Burma and made it out. Sadly, we were unable to save his life after a traffic accident. RFA is mourning his loss. He was a real shining example of what, indigenous journalists can be in Burma. And, everybody is very inspired by his example, and we hope to have a whole country of them and, free press and no more RFA in Burma. Thank you.
Thank you, Libby, and I can't wait for the meeting when we don't have to actually talk about anybody that we lost. It's tragic and horrible to have to do this every meeting. We also can't forget that Al Hurra TV's Bashar Fahmy remains missing, incommunicado, after being captured in Syria on August 20th, 2012. More than 30 journalists are currently missing in Syria, making it one of the most dangerous places on earth for the press. And I call once again on behalf of the board for the release of Bashar Fahmy, as well as the release of any journalists being held in Syria and elsewhere on the globe. More recently, on November 30th, Elias Dai, an RFERL Afghan service correspondent, was detained for 3 hours by security forces on the order of the local governor in the Helmand province. Dai was arrested because of a live report he made on a suicide bombing. Threats are not always tangible. Over the past few months, RFERL was targeted repeatedly by cyber attacks, which also affected other BBG networks using the Pangea content management system. These attacks slowed, but did not stop our global multimedia news services, and were resolved through the collaborative work of teams at RFERL and at the International Broadcasting Bureau. And congratulations, Kevin, to you to get through that. It's not always easy, and also Andre at BBG. Throughout all of this, China, Cuba, Iran, and other countries continue their attempts to keep their citizens from accessing news from our networks. Across our organization, we have innovated to keep our news accessible using tools ranging from satellite transmissions to paper flash drives. This innovative spirit, coupled with our high-quality, reliable news and information programming, has made it so that our global reach is at an unprecedented level. As we announced earlier this week, programming across the BBG networks now reaches a weekly audience of more than 206 million people. Speaking on behalf of the board, I want to thank and congratulate every single person working throughout this agency and at each of our entities who makes this possible every day. I've said since the beginning, and this board since the beginning, we have some very good people doing some very good work all across the board, and as we talk about every meeting, many of them risk their personal safety to do so. So now let's turn to the business before the board today. On December 4th, the board received by email materials for the consent agenda, which gave us, thankfully, a couple of weeks to review them. I think all the governors had sufficient time to review this material, and I didn't receive any comments from any governors. There are actually only 2 items for the board consideration as part of the consent agenda today. The first are draft minutes of the October 23rd board meeting. And the second is a set of amended BBG bylaws reflecting changes adopted by the board and proposed technical amendments to conform with the approved amendments. One point on the second thing, there's no changes of the bylaw other than conforming. We didn't make any changes to the bylaws that were anything other than conforming to things that we had actually already voted on in board meetings. So this is basically taking things that the board has previously voted on and then conforming the bylaws to match those things. There's nothing, we've reviewed it in depth, and there's nothing that we are proposing to do in this change that has anything to do other than what's already been voted on. So is there any comment or question or items on the consent agenda by any governor? Okay, seeing none, would anybody like to move for the adoption of the consent agenda?
Second.
Ryan moves, Matt seconds. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any objections? The consent agenda carries. Okay. With the departure of Dick Lobo and given the vacant IBB director position, the board today wishes to propose a resolution to create an interim management structure to manage the IBB and the day-to-day operations of the agency until such time as the CEO of U.S. International Media has been selected. A couple comments on this before we get to this, and I'm going to ask any of the governors that want to speak to this to talk about this. First of all, I want to make it clear, and I think I speak on behalf of the board, that we are all extremely committed to hiring not only a CEO, but a great CEO for this organization. We think it's critical. This is a part-time board, and we need a full-time CEO to manage the organization. And this interim structure is an interim structure. Our goal is to have a CEO in place, and this hopefully interim structure will give us a little get us up to speed on some things and reform that will allow the CEO to hit the ground running. But it's critical not only to get a CEO in place, but to get the right CEO in place. And so the board is going to manage this process in a thoughtful manner and get to the place where we're all very happy and confident that we have the right person, and this could take some time. So what we decided to do while this committee on the CEO was working to find a CEO was to not wait and put a structure in place that we felt could really start to bring change to this agency and push forward reforms that the board is committed to do. And so we decided to identify 3 individuals within the IBB who we believe have distinguished themselves as forward-thinking and innovative, and think that a team of 3 dividing up the delegated responsibilities can help us really bring change here. So let me go through quickly what this structure is, and then we'll talk about the resolution. So first, Andre Mendez, who I know is at the table here at the end. Andre, raise your hand. He's currently the director of the Office of Technology Services and Innovation. Susie Carroll, somewhere here. To my right, there's Susie, who's currently the board executive director, and Rob Bowl, Rob somewhere down at the end of the table, the Director of Innovation, will make up this interim leadership structure. This is our triumvirate who's going to lead the organization on an interim basis until the CEO is identified and hired. The resolution that puts in place basically divides up the delegated responsibilities. We've basically shifted. We've kind of divided those up into 3 kind of buckets, with Andre really continuing to handle his technical operations responsibilities in addition to many of the administrative functions of this agency, legal, financial, HR, and so forth. Rob will continue to handle his responsibilities at ODDI, but also help us manage the various strategic pieces of the organization, including Bruce Sherman's strategy group and Kalu's Office of Performance and Review that reviews how we're doing. And then Susie will kind of expand, has been managing communication to the board, will expand her responsibilities to oversee kind of all communications to the Hill, to the outside world, to, very importantly, to the internal communications to the employee base. And we really see this group of 3 working as a group as opposed to working as individuals with their various pieces. And the board's committed to have this group really bring change. We've challenged them to go fast, not slow, and identify places where we can get better and bring change. And hopefully, this group can get the organization really moving faster and better when we do have a CEO in place. So before I do comments, I want to just one quick housekeeping issue. So if the board has a red line resolution in front of them, we have made 2 changes to the resolution that was previously sent out to the board. There are two kind of mechanical changes I want to talk about really quickly. In the 3rd paragraph, it had previously said that this interim structure would be in place until a CEO is selected and sworn in. This CEO is not going to be appointed or approved by the Senate under our current structure, so does not need to be sworn in. And so we're taking out the words "and sworn in," even though the CEO actually will be sworn in, as all federal employees are. We wanted to make it clear this was not a formal Senate-related swearing in. And then in paragraph 2, or under the resolution, it previously said that. So one important part, which I haven't mentioned, that's in the resolution is the board also deemed that we, as a board, needed a little bit more of a formal structure for dealing with our group of 3 here at the agency. And so we've asked, and he's accepted, Matt Armstrong to serve as what we're calling the management liaison to the board. We're not delegating any authorities to Matt, so this is really a advisory basis. He's a board member like the rest of us, but what we envision is that Matt will be spending more time with the management here and really helping them through this interim period and serving a bit as a bridge for the rest of the board to this management team. Thank you, Matt, by the way, for volunteering to do this. And in the paragraph that establishes Matt as the management liaison, it says, unless otherwise provided, he's not authorized to make operational decisions. We're not delegating operational authority to one of the board members. The only place where actually you could argue we are is that we have, in a situation where our gang of 3 disagrees, we are basically empowering Matt to help resolve that disagreement, and one could argue that that is an operational decision. We don't see it as that, but that's why we are actually striking the word unless and adding the word except otherwise provided. It's really for that one instance. I think if our selection of these 3 individuals was made carefully, not only to pick people who are innovative and change agents, but also to pick people who are collaborative. If there are disagreements between the 3 of them that can't be resolved, we have a bigger problem. So hopefully we won't get to that situation, but we wanted to at least envision it and allow Matt to kind of be a bit of a referee to the extent we do come across this. So personally, I'm very excited about having this group of individuals. I think it's going to energize the organization. They have the full unanimous support of the board, and that's important. And I thank them for volunteering to do this, and thank Matt, as I said, for volunteering to do this. Let me open up the floor to any other board member who wants to make comments on any of this before we get to a vote on the resolution.
Thank you. I'm very excited as well for this. This is a great opportunity. I look forward to working closely with Andre, Rob, and Susie. The only thing I want to add is we laid out in the resolution the titles. So Andre will be the Director of Global Operations, Rob will be the Director of Global Strategy, and Susie will be the Director of Global Communications to highlight the, not to use the word a second time, but the global nature of the activities. And so that's all. So looking forward to the active engagement and facing the challenges and overcoming them.
And Matt will be the global management liaison. Any other comments from any other board members? Susan?
I just want to say I think you laid it out really well, Mr. Chairman, and I also am looking forward to this new management structure, emphasis on it being interim until we have a CEO, which you've done. And the success of this, the new sort of team of 3 really depends on the collaboration and trust amongst them, which we talked about last night. And I think it's very strong. So I think this is a big step forward, and I'm looking forward to it. So thank you.
Ryan, Ken, Michael, Doug, any other comments? Ryan? Nope, all set. Okay. Quick note on process. So we have to submit, are going to submit this interim management structure in a programming notification to the relevant congressional oversight committees and undertake personal actions that are necessary to implement this resolution. So our hope is that this structure will be in place by January 6, 2014, or at the very latest the week afterwards. So with that being said, can I have a motion to approve this resolution on the interim management structure?
I'll make a motion.
Susan motions and Ryan seconds. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. So welcome, as of January, our new interim management team. Before we move on, I want to talk for just a minute or two about somebody else who's important to the organization, and I want to kind of, clear up any confusion that may reign here about what's happening. So for 15 years, Jeff Trimble, who's here at the table with us, has served this agency with distinction and success, and no, he's not leaving. So before this sounds like a, you might want to, we're not letting him. He's been an editorial executive, he's been a manager, he's been a senior official, and Jeff and I have talked both in here and at his home for several hours about each step of the way he's gotten further and further away from his love, which is really journalism and the news. And so as opposed to having him part of this management team here, I think what we've all agreed as a board is to try to find Jeff something where we can use his incredible talents and experience in the organization to help us with the various challenges we have, and at the same time get him back closer to his love of journalism and editorial. And the board continues to discuss various potential roles for Jeff, and I think we will announce something in the coming weeks. But I didn't want there to be ambiguity about Jeff's role. We very much value, Jeff, the tremendous work you've done over the past 15 years. And I think we're trying to find exactly the right place. And I know you've been involved in those discussions, so I wanted to quickly say it publicly so everybody knew it. I don't know, Jeff, if you want to say a couple words.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. First, my colleagues and I here will take all necessary steps to implement the board's direction and provide all support that we can to Susie and Andre and Rob to get the new team in place as they step into their roles. Thank you also very much for taking into consideration my interest in getting more closely involved in journalism that's at the core of the mission and the work that we do here at BBG. And finally, I'm really pleased to be handing over the IBB management portfolio just as three, pretty significant, I think, achievements have been announced this week. One is record global audiences for U.S. international broadcasting. The second is a clean financial audit for the agency for FY13. And finally, a modest but nevertheless real improvement in the agency's scores and rankings in the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey as assessed by the Partnership for Public Service. There's a lot of work still to be done on these issues and many others, but I'd like to thank my colleagues at IBB and the broadcast networks for their support and congratulate all of them on these successes because they're their successes. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to the board.
Thanks, Jeff. And I will say, in the private sector, I'm in the media business too, and when you're in the communications and media business, what you really have is your people. And it's true very much so at this organization as well. And I think the board and the organization is very much committed to making this not just a better place to work, but the best place to work and have employees who are excited to come here every day and believe in the mission and know what they're trying to do and where we're trying to get to. So going from low down in the rankings to low but a little bit better in the rankings is nothing to crow about, and we're not happy at all with where we are and know we have a lot of work to do, as Jeff said, but at least we're moving a little bit in the right direction. So my commendations to everybody who's worked hard to starting to turn this battleship around a little bit. There's nothing more important to this organization than making it a good place to work for our dedicated people. Okay, so moving on to the next section, members of the public who register to attend our open meetings, and I'm thrilled we have a lot here today. I know a lot of them are behind me. They have a chance to register to speak for up to 3 minutes each for a maximum of 10 speakers. My hope is someday we have 10 speakers who want to speak here. Today we have just one. Our friend and colleague Ann Noonan has registered to speak, and so Ann, I'd like to invite you to come to the table and introduce yourself and address the board. Thank you, Ann.
Thank you. My name's Ann Noonan. I'm the Executive Director for the Committee for U.S. International Broadcasting. I'd like to be sure that everyone here knows that CUSIB is a nonpartisan organization that came about at the request of people who work on matters involving journalism for media freedom and human rights. All of our work is done on a volunteer basis. We have no budget, so we're beholden to nobody. I'd like to share CUSIB's Christmas wish list of 8 things we hope will happen in the spirit of peace on earth and goodwill to all. Number 1, for the BBG to fully fund and not hinder Voice of America's Cantonese, Mandarin, and Tibetan services, especially radio broadcasts. These vital broadcasts provide desperately needed information for people who are being crushed out of existence in Tibet and China by China's government. These broadcasts are cheap, they help poor people receive news, and unlike the internet or satellite television dishes, they cannot be monitored. We implore the IBB to stop its efforts to effectively shut down the Voice of America broadcasts to China by insisting its transition to internet only. Number 2, for Radio Free Asia to continue to keep the world apprised about the case of Chinese dissident Zhang Lin, whose trial began today and whose daughters, Annie and Ru Li, now live in California with CUSIB board member Reggie Littlejohn. Number 3, for VOA to remain fully funded and for the BBG governors to break the bureaucratic resistance at VOA and carry out immediate management reforms both at VOA and IBB. We applaud BBG for the change of management at RFERL. We applaud Kevin Close for his efforts to restore high journalistic standards to RFERL and for his outstanding coverage of events in Ukraine. We also applaud VOA Ukrainian Services for its outstanding coverage. But VOA as an organization and VOA's central newsroom continue to fail. VOA's English media's coverage of Vice President Biden and U.S. Senator McCain were especially deficient. There are personnel changes that need to be made immediately. Experienced journalists with managerial experience should be hired to fulfill VOA's mission to bring news, information, and opinions for worldwide audiences. This includes reporting on U.S. foreign policy. Number 4, for the BBG to resolve its lawsuits that were brought against RFERL by its discriminated foreign employees in Prague. We also appeal to BBG and to Kevin Close to rehire the women journalists who were fired by the previous management from RFERL Kazakh service after they objected to offensive and inappropriate content change. Number 5, for the BBG to resolve the lawsuits that were brought by illegally fired RAF employees who worked for the Office of Cuban Broadcasting. Let these people be reinstated. Their stories demonstrate incredible, tremendous injustice by IBB executives. Number 6, for the BBG to revise its December 16th press release that boasts research showing growth in their audience. We consider this particular press release to be highly deceptive. The BBG has lost audiences in the Middle East and in other critical regions for the United States, and that needs to be addressed. Most of the reported gains appear to be in Latin America, where IBB probably counted an already existing audience. Number 7, for the BBG governors to realize the value and independence of surrogate broadcasters. We need them to continue to coexist with VOA, which needs to be reformed to fulfill its own news mission and to start serious reporting of U.S. news and opinions. And number 8, for the BBG to send CUSIB the documents that we asked for on September 19th, 2013, in 2 Freedom of Information requests. We expect that any information that may be redacted in these U.S. government documents will have been done for genuine legal cause and not because the information turns out to be embarrassing to any current or former IBB employees. Thank you, and may you all have a blessed Christmas.
Thank you, Ann. We are now going to take a break and with this meeting and reconvene down in Studio 47 for our VOA deep dive, and then after that, we'll come back up here for our tech panel. So let's adjourn for 10 minutes and reconvene in Studio 47. Thanks.